When Henry James first attempted to publish the book Daisy Miller, American editors rejected it because they saw it as insulting to Americans. We will be giving evidence as to why they viewed it that way. We chose this question because it is controversial and relevant even in our present day, with many offenses and insults directed at the American people. We plan to show how Daisy Miller was insulting, the support and also opposition to the Christian worldview within the story, and how this book has had effects on our perspectives on ministry. Daisy Miller is portrayed as an American girl who is unsophisticated, flirtatious, and very unserious. In fact, the book states it when said, "She was very unsophisticated. She was only a pretty American flirt." At one point, another character addresses her and it says, "I'm afraid your habits are those of a flirt," said Winterbourne gravely. "Of course they are," she cried, giving him her little smiling stare again. "I'm a fearful, frightful flirt. Did you ever hear of a nice girl that was not? But I suppose you'll tell me now that I am not a nice girl." This can be seen as a portrayal by Henry James of the unserious, flirtatious, and unsophisticated side of the American people. The next American portrayal is of Randolph Miller, who is displayed as immature, disobedient, and obnoxious. Throughout the book, he makes statements such as, "American men are the best." As well as when giving his opinion on Europe, he says, "You can't see anything here at night, except when there's a moon. In America, there's always a moon." He clearly displays the attitude of ethnocentrism by seeing Americans as being the best, as well as criticizing Europe in an immature and obnoxious way without showing evidence of thinking about his comments. Next, we have Miss Miller. Miss Miller is seen as weak, frail, and displays hands-off parenting. When describing Miss Miller, or Daisy's mother, the book says, "Her mother was a small, spare, light person with a wandering eye, a very exiguous nose, and a large forehead, decorated with a certain amount of thin, much frizzled hair." The book also displays her as being sick and unashamed of it, such as the comment, "She's got the dyspepsia," said Randolph. "I've got it too. Father's got it. I've got it most." This announcement, instead of embarrassing Miss Miller, seemed to relieve her. Near the end of the book, Winterbourne believed that she talked a good deal about Dr. Davis, but Winterbourne paid her the compliment of saying to himself that she was not, after all, such a monstrous goose. Clearly, Henry James was saying something about the American people and their weakness. Another American portrayed in this book is Winterbourne, an American who preferred Europe. The book says that he was visiting his aunt from Geneva having been for a long time his place of residence. Throughout the book, Winterbourne displays that he sees a clear difference between Americans and Europeans, such as when telling Daisy to stop flirting, he states, "But if you won't flirt with me, do cease at least to flirt with your friend at the piano. They don't understand that sort of thing here." As well as his additional comment to Daisy about flirting, where he states, "Well," said Winterbourne, "when you deal with natives, you must go by the custom of the place. Flirting is a purely American custom. It doesn't exist here. So when you show yourself in public with Mr. Giovanelli and without your mother," then the book leaves his comment unfinished for the readers to fill in the gaps. Perhaps Henry James is noting that Americans flirt and do not understand the customs and appropriate mannerisms of other cultures. Perhaps Winterbourne is a symbol of an American who realizes that he prefers a Europe to America. Americans may have found this book insulting due to the general habits of Americans that it portrays, such as seen in Miss Costello's nieces and Daisy's father. This can be seen in a dialogue when talking to his aunt about Daisy. Winterbourne asks, "But don't they all do these things? The younger girls in America?" Winterbourne inquired. Miss Costello stared a moment. "I should like to see my granddaughters do them," she declared grimly. This seemed to throw some light upon the matter, for Winterbourne remembered to have heard that his pretty cousins in New York were tremendous flirts. This generalization of young girls in America may certainly be among the reasons as to why Daisy Miller was seen as insulting to Americans. How Daisy Miller supports the Christian worldview.
Marriage is the first point for the Christian worldview. Though there are flirtatious characters in the story, they still respect the sanctity of marriage, found in Genesis 2:18. On page 45, we see an excerpt on Daisy's thoughts on when it is improper to flirt. "It seems to me much more proper in young unmarried women than in old married ones." This is an example of how the characters, mainly Daisy, interact with the idea of unmarried women versus married women when flirting. While this might have been a challenging statement in the time and place, I would actually agree with her in her remark. The second point for the Christian worldview is attending church. We see the characters gathering on page 47 at St. Peter's Church on a Sunday. This goes along with Hebrews 10:36, which says, "Let us not give up meeting together as others are in the habit of doing." Even though there was a lot of conflict between the characters, they still decided to keep the Sabbath and go to church. The third point for the Christian worldview is the fact that some people may look beautiful on the outside, but look ugly on the inside. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "God sees David not from the outside, but from within." So Winterbourne looks at Daisy's appearance, which gets him into situations that he could have avoided if he saw what was on the inside of Daisy. And so on page 6, we see they were wonderfully pretty eyes, and indeed Winterbourne had not seen for a long time anything prettier than his fair countrywoman's various features, her complexion, her nose, her ears, and her teeth.
In this section, I will be discussing the opposition to the Christian worldview. Time to make America great again. The first point that is against the Christian worldview is the promiscuity of Daisy. She has admittedly had many gentlemen friends, including on page 16, she says, "Last winter I had 17 dinners given to me, and 3 of them were by gentlemen." This goes directly against Galatians 5:19-21. The acts of the flesh are obvious. Daisy and her promiscuity arise several times throughout the book, including closer to the end where she decides to make a play and, mess about, we'll say. The second point is Mrs. Costello's self-righteousness or judgmental spirit. This goes directly against Matthew 23:28 and Romans 10:3. In fact, she goes on to say on page 22, "They are very common," Mrs. Costello declared. "They are the sort of Americans that one does one's duty by not accepting." This statement kind of shows how very self-centered, judgmental, and also how extremely sanctimonious she is. She also claims to be quite exclusive, which goes directly against what the Bible says to be inclusive of everyone and how everyone needs Jesus. The last section discussed will be the emphasis on money and class showing importance and value or exclusivity. An example from the book would be, "But my dear aunt, she is not, after all, a common sauvage. She is a young lady," said Miss Costello, "who has an intimacy with her mamma's courier." This short excerpt from the book describes a relationship of one that is sort of a caste system, where the lower caste has not much importance as the higher. Now, the person saying this is Miss Costello, who we have already described as quite self-righteous, who, however, there are many points throughout the rest of the book which indeed are based off of a class system. This goes directly against James 2:3 and 4, and how if you show special attention to somebody who is rich, you are sinning. And if you show the poor person that they are not as important as the rich, you are also sinning.
So what? How has reading the book affected our perspective on ministry? People carry assumptions based on appearance. In ministry, we will face different groups and we will have to adapt to their culture to bring the message effectively. Daisy's behavior in Rome leads Mrs. Costello to call Daisy a hopelessly vulgar person, and for report of Daisy's behavior, she refuses to even meet her. As Paul said in 1 Corinthians 9:22-23, he becomes all things for the sake of carrying the gospel. We must also understand that our everyday appearance and the way we carry ourselves sends a message to those around us about faith. Daisy Miller's story also reminds us that we should be intentional about building relationships. Daisy is a flirt, and her indirect communication causes her to build unstable relationships. As Christians, we should build relationships with the intent to build each other up, not tear each other down, or employing jealousy to get other people's attention, like Daisy does to Winterbourne. The story warns us not to idolize other people or make them our primary goal. In Daisy's pursuit of Winterbourne, she recklessly endangers herself. Her pursuit of Winterbourne is eventually what kills her. Winterbourne also places Daisy on a pedestal, ignoring her evident flaws and his love in Italy for her present beauty. As Christians, we should remember our primary goal, which is to love God and our neighbors.